Hello, fourth graders. This week you will be taking a crop duster tour of the Midwest. One of the questions you should be able to answer by the end is, why do we call the Midwest America's heartland? So here's another map of the United States, and you can see the territory that we will be visiting this week is the Midwest, which is familiar to us since we live right here. Some of the sites that you will be visiting can be found on 117 in your textbook. The red dots symbolize the different sites that we will be visiting. We will be visiting a farm in Iowa, St. Louis, Missouri, Dodge City, Kansas, Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, the Sioux Locks in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, Illinois, and we will also visit Wrigley Field in Chicago while we're there. And our final destination is at the Mall of America in Minnesota, which I'm sure many of us have been to before. All right, so in this lesson, we will be mapping features of the Midwest. Whoops, I'm going to have to actually skip ahead here because we are not doing the geography challenge. So what you're going to need is page 64 in your interactive notebook or workbook for social studies, where just like last time, you will be drawing symbols at each site on your map representing something that you learned from that location. You will need your textbook open to page 117. You can always refer back to this page as you are filling out your map so that you can see where each of the sites are that we are visiting. All right, so boys and girls, I need you to follow along on page 117 as you listen to our tour guide this time. Our tour guide's name is Mr. Ortiz, and he will take us around the Midwest region of the United States.
Hi, my name is Mr. Ortiz. I'll be your guide as we explore the Midwest. I'm an economist at a bank in Chicago. My job is to study how people make, use, and manage goods and services. I want to lead your tour for several reasons. I want you to learn about the economy of the Midwest. I also want to show you the geography of this region and tell you about its colorful history. And I love to travel. We will visit 9 of my favorite places in the Midwest. Along the way, look for answers to this question. How did this one region earn these 2 very different nicknames? America's breadbasket and America's heartland. We will be touring in little planes called crop dusters. Most of the time, these planes are used to spray chemicals on crops. Because of their small size, crop dusters can fly close to the ground. We should get some great views. Fasten your seatbelts for takeoff. Our first stop will be in Missouri, nicknamed the Show Me State.
Clear for takeoff, 320, descend to destination.
The fourth graders, the question that we are trying to answer at the end of our tour is how the Midwest region has earned 2 different nicknames. One of them is America's breadbasket, and the second one is America's heartland. So as I said before, on page 64 of your workbook, you will use this map to draw the route. Don't forget to label the names of the places that we visit, as well as drawing a symbol that represents something that you learned. So we're going to skip ahead to page 120 of our textbook, where we will be visiting the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri.
Welcome to St. Louis, Missouri, and its Gateway Arch. I chose St. Louis as our first stop because of its history. This is where the settlement of the West began. St. Louis began as a frontier town. The frontier was a region of wild country, unexplored by Europeans. French traders first settled in St. Louis. They chose this spot because it is near 2 mighty rivers. The Mississippi and Missouri rivers come together just north of St. Louis. Pioneers were the first people to settle the West. They started their journey by heading west from St. Louis. This is why St. Louis is called the Gateway to the West. The Gateway Arch was built to honor those pioneers. It is a proud reminder of St. Louis's history. The Gateway Arch is one of the most famous arches in the world. Made of gleaming stainless steel, it rises about 630 feet above the Mississippi River. Visitors can ride a tram inside it to the top. I did this a few years ago with my family. The cars are small and the ride is bumpy, but the view from the top is great.
Okay, so fourth graders, here you're going to want to pause the video, label St. Louis, Missouri on your map, and draw a symbol that represents something you learned from this area. Our next stop is a farm in Iowa.
If you wanted to invent a farming state, you couldn't do much better than Iowa. That's what my best friend from college said. He grew up on an Iowa farm that looks a lot like the one you see here. First, he said, you want your farm state to be mostly flat. Iowa began as prairie land. A prairie is an area of flat or rolling land covered mostly with tall grasses. Later on, farmers planted crops on the prairie. Next, you want fertile soil. The word fertile means able to produce good crops. Iowa has so much fertile soil that farms cover almost all of the state. Finally, you would want good transportation. Iowa lies between the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Before there were trains, Iowa farmers used these rivers to send their crops to market. Today, Iowa farms produce huge crops of corn, soybeans, oats, and hay. Much of this harvest is fed to livestock. Livestock are animals raised on farms, such as cattle, hogs, and chickens. Iowa farm products are used in all kinds of foods. The chances are good that the next bag of popcorn you pop was grown on an Iowa farm just like this one.
All right, so pause the video here. Label somewhere in Iowa, doesn't matter where, a farm in Iowa, drawing a symbol that helps you remember something that you've learned. All right, we are moving on to page 122. We will be visiting Dodge City, Kansas, where the cattle once roamed. This is a photograph of Dodge City taken long ago. In your book, you will also see a photo of what Dodge City looks like today.
Welcome to Dodge City, Kansas. Kansas, a land of flat plains, has long been famous for wheat and cowboys. The plains of Kansas make it a wonderful place to grow wheat. Travel through Kansas in the early summer and you will see mile after mile of golden wheat. Kansas produces more wheat than any other state. Back in the 1870s, cowboys from Texas used to herd cattle across the Great Plains to Dodge City. Herding cattle is hot, dusty, smelly work. Those cattle drives took weeks and sometimes months. When the cattle finally reached Dodge City, they were loaded onto trains and shipped east for sale. Today, fewer cattle graze on the plains. Cattle are mostly raised on feedlots. Feedlots are areas or buildings where livestock are kept while being fattened for slaughter. Dodge City is home to one of the biggest meatpacking plants in the country. Meatpacking is the preparing of meat for sale. It's an important industry in the Midwest. When I was your age, I wanted to be a cowboy, or as my dad would say in Spanish, a vaquero. Some people still work as cowboys today, but they are likely to leave their horses at work at the end of the day. We'll stop here to go learn more about cowboys from long ago.
Make sure you pause the video, label Dodge City on your map along with a symbol. From Dodge City, we fly north to the Black Hills of South Dakota. Mount Rushmore National Monument honors 4 American presidents. There's also Crazy Horse Memorial, which honors the Sioux chief Crazy Horse. This one is still in construction. All right, we are on page 123, South Dakota's Heroes.
Two huge monuments are carved into the Black Hills of South Dakota. The first is Mount Rushmore National Memorial. It shows the faces of 4 American presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Each head is 6 stories tall. The second monument honors an American Indian named Crazy Horse, who was chief of the Sioux tribe. It is still being carved into the Black Hills. When it is finished, Crazy Horse Memorial will be the world's largest statue. The Black Hills are sacred to the Sioux and other American Indians. When white settlers moved into this area, they began pushing American Indian tribes off this land. American Indians fought back to keep their homeland. This struggle led to war with the United States. During that war, an American general named George Custer attacked a group of Sioux who were camping by Little Bighorn River in Montana. Crazy Horse led his warriors into battle, yelling, "It is a good day to die." In minutes, Custer and his men were dead. Despite this victory, the Sioux lost most of their land over time. Like many other American Indian tribes, the Sioux were pushed by white settlers onto reservations, or special areas set aside for American Indian tribes to live.
Please pause the video again to put Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse Memorial on your map along with a symbol. All right, our next stop is Michigan's Sioux Locks, linking the Great Lakes, found on page 124.
You are looking down one of my favorite sites, the Sioux Locks. The Sioux Locks are the 2 longest locks in the world. They can raise and lower ships that are up to 1,000 feet in length. The Great Lakes are part of a water highway that stretches from the Midwest to the Atlantic Ocean. Ships move from lake to lake along canals. Because the lakes are at different water levels, locks are used to lift and lower ships from one lake to the next. The Sioux Locks raise or lower ships the 21 feet between Lake Huron and Lake Superior. Many ships pass through the Sioux Locks each day. Some are small passenger boats. Others are ocean-going ships filled with iron ore, coal, grain, or other cargo. People call these ships salties because they have journeyed from the Atlantic Ocean.
Please pause the video here to put Michigan's Sioux Locks on your map. Our next stop is Detroit, Michigan, also known as Motor City, USA. The photo here shows cars being built in Detroit in the early 1900s.
In 1896, a Michigan farm boy named Henry Ford built his first car. At that time, automobiles were very expensive to buy. People saw cars as toys for the rich. But Ford had different ideas. He dreamed of building cars that most people could afford. Ford's dream gave birth to the American automobile industry. In 1908, Ford started an automobile factory in Detroit, Michigan. He needed a way to keep his costs down. In the past, workers could build only one car at a time. So Ford installed a moving assembly line. A moving belt carried unfinished cars past workers. Each worker did one task. One worker might install a windshield. Another might screw on a door handle. The time needed to assemble a car dropped from 12 hours to just 93 minutes. The assembly line lowered the cost of each car by reducing the time it took to make it. Ford's success brought other car makers to Detroit. Detroit became known as Motor City, or Motown for short. The automobile industry attracted many other businesses to the Midwest too. Today, Midwest industries continue to look for better ways to manufacture goods. One example is the invention and use of robots or computer-controlled mechanical devices to speed up assembly lines. We'll stop here and learn more about Ford's original assembly line.
Okay, so stop here. Label Detroit, Michigan on your map along with a symbol. Our next stop is O'Hare International Airport, found on page 126 in your textbook, and this is found in Chicago, Illinois.
You are looking at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, Illinois. It is one of the busiest airports in the United States. Hundreds of thousands of people pass through O'Hare each day. That adds up to millions of airplane passengers a year. Chicago has always been a transportation hub, or a center for moving goods and people. In the 1800s, railroad tracks fanned out from Chicago across the Midwest. Trains left Chicago every day, carrying goods from factories to small farming towns. The trains returned loaded with corn, wheat, and livestock for the big cities. Today, railroads, highways, airports, rivers, and lakes move more people and goods into and out of Chicago than they do any other American city. Moving all these people and goods is a big business. O'Hare International Airport by itself employs 50,000 workers. As an economist, I know how important transportation is to the economy of the Midwest. Last year, for example, my college friend from Iowa sold his entire soybean crop to a buyer in Japan. Without a good transportation system, how could my farmer friend move his crop halfway around the world?
Make sure to label O'Hare Airport on your map. And then we are moving just a little bit further east to Wrigley Field in Chicago, Illinois. This is page 127.
For me, this is one of the best views in the world. You are looking down at Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs. Sports are popular in the Midwest. The first professional baseball team played not far from here in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio. As a kid, I listened on the radio to the Cubs play baseball. The Cubs never won a championship, but I still became a big fan. Now that I live in Chicago, I love watching the Cubs play at Wrigley Field. Wrigley Field is a special place for people who like baseball. It is the second oldest baseball park in America. A lot of historic events have happened here. The most famous one may be Babe Ruth's called shot during Game 3 of the 1932 World Series. As the story goes, When Ruth came up to bat, he pointed to the bleachers. Then, on the next pitch, he hit a home run to that very spot. I wish I'd been there to see it.
All right, fourth graders, so once you have put Wrigley Field on your map, we are moving on to our final destination. You can see this is an older photo when it used to be called Camp Snoopy. In Minnesota's Mall of America. This is on page 128.
Our last stop is the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. This is the largest indoor shopping mall in the United States. The Mall of America was built in 1992. The nation's first mall, covered by a roof, was built in 1956. Its purpose was to make shopping a more pleasant experience by protecting shoppers from bad weather. People in the Midwest have to pay a lot of attention to the weather. In winter, storms called blizzards bring heavy snow and freezing winds. Spring brings hailstorms that drop hailstones or lumps of ice instead of rain. Spring is also when tornado season begins. Because of these types of weather, indoor malls are a good way to protect shoppers. These malls also offer customers lots of choices about what to buy. The Mall of America has more than 520 stores. If you spent just 10 minutes in each one, it would take you 4 days and 3 nights to visit the entire mall. And that time doesn't include your eating in any of the 50 restaurants, visiting any of the 14 movie theaters, or playing in the amusement park.
Well, that concludes our tour. And so our last thing we're going to do is listen to the summary on page 129, as soon as I can find it here. Also from Mr. Ortiz, summing up what we've learned and also answering the questions. Why is the Midwest known as the American breadbasket and America's heartland? Oh my goodness, I am not finding it. There it is. Sorry about that. So this is on page 129 of your textbook. Whoops, I had it and then lost it. This just shows where we all went. There it is.
When we began, I asked you why the Midwest is called America's breadbasket. Midwestern farmers grow a lot of the wheat we use to make bread. Kansas grows the most wheat. North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Ohio, Illinois, and Nebraska also produce large wheat crops. You will learn more about agriculture and why the Midwest earned this nickname in the next chapter. Why do we also call the Midwest America's heartland? There are many answers to this question. One answer looks at geography. The Midwest lies at the heart or center of the United States. Another answer looks at history. The Midwest is the point where pioneers began their westward journeys. It is where American Indians fought bravely to defend their lands. And the first professional baseball team played in the Midwest. A third answer looks at economics. The Midwest is a center for both farming and industry. From popcorn to cars, many products you use every day come from America's economic heartland. Our crop dusters are about to land. Thank you very much for coming on my tour. Your next journey will be a bit different. It will take you back in time to learn about Detroit, Michigan during World War II.
Thank you, fourth graders, for taking a crop duster tour of the Midwest with us this week.